This is Pablo Gonzalez. I am the co-founder of BeTheStage.live and the host of the Chief Executive Connector podcast. And right now, I am happy to be here on the Relationships and Revenue podcast with my friend, John Hewlett.
Welcome to the Relationships and Revenue podcast with John Hewlett. Welcome back, everyone, to the Relationships and Revenue podcast. I am your humble host, John Hewlett. So glad to be with you today. And it is my honor and my privilege to introduce my friend and someone who I believe is going to become your friend, Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo, how are you?
I'm great. I really hope you're right. I really want to be the friend of the person who's hanging out with us right now. John is not kidding when he says that. Dude, I'm so happy to be here, John. I appreciate you having me. I have a ton of respect for you, and to be graced with your stage is something I don't take lightly, man. So I hope I give a lot of value to you and to our buddy that's hanging out right now.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell the folks who are listening and watching that I get something from Pablo every time I see and hear him. Every single time I get something. So I have the utmost confidence that you all are going to get way more than you're expecting from this. I really do. So let's just jump right into it. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Pablo. As he mentioned, he has his own podcast, which is called the Chief Executive Connector. Make sure I say that right.
Right.
Of which he is. For sure. He is the Chief Executive Connector. He'll be able to tell us more about that in a minute. You know, I call him a human connector. That's really what he is. He's all about relationships / connections. The name of his company is Connect With Pablo. And oh my gosh, I'm just thinking of all the things that you do.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot, you know?
Oh my gosh, folks, I can't even begin to get into it, but you've got to check him out. And toward the end, we'll tell you where you can connect with Pablo. This will be really important to do that. And one of the great things about him is that I will tell you, when you reach out to him with a direct message, an email, whatever form you do it in, he gets back to you. Unlike a lot of other people out there who either have somebody else do it or they just act like, that person's not important. I'm not going to mess with that. You know, if you don't have enough followers on your profile, you know, they won't pay attention to you. Pablo's not like that. Not at all, man. He is there to help people. I know he is.
I'm just down to be your friend. Whoever's listening to this right now, I want to be your friend. Like if you reach out to me, I want to be your friend. I'm in.
For sure. Now I mentioned several titles that Pablo has, but I would venture to say the next one I'm going to mention is probably his number one. He is husband to Martha.
Indeed, man. Indeed. My wife is, and I've spoke to you about this before. My wife's my muse, and I would not be, it is through her eyes that I really began to embrace struggle and growth as two things that go together. Prior to that, I had lived a life of convenience, John, right? Like seeking convenience and seeking the easy way out, the shortcut, right? Like stuff always came easy to me. And therefore I never really needed to strive to achieve great things. And being married to Marta has, and living with her to, number one, be truly seen by somebody. When you live with somebody 24/7, it's pretty hard to fake the funk, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I used to describe myself as like a 20-something-year-old Huck Finn, right? Like I've always been able to speak well. I know how to influence people. I know how to kind of get away with shenanigans. And being married to somebody that you truly, truly respect, that goes away. And you gotta really show up consistently.
Yeah, you do.
And second, she's overcome a lot, man. My wife overcame this like sexual abuse that happened to her at a young age, and a lot of family trauma that came out from it. And seeing her fight that stuff head on when it came up in our relationship really just shattered any excuse that I could have had of I'm good enough and I'm good where I'm at now. I don't really need to go any harder. And I remember having this like conversation with her at one point. I'm not kidding, man. Like I can't believe this happened, but there was a certain moment where this trauma had like resurfaced in her life and she was just nothing short of fighting for her life on a daily basis about it.
Yes.
And at a certain point, she was asking things of me. And my response to her was, just because you're trying to improve so much doesn't mean you have to hold me to that standard. I said that verbatim, right? Like I was like,
Wow.
you don't have to hold me to that standard. I'm good where I'm at. And I think that the moment those words left my mouth was just a real reality check of who I am as a man and who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And they rang so hollow in hearing them coming out of my mouth that I don't think I've been the same person since.
Oh my gosh. I can so relate to what you're talking about there. I really can. You know, I can remember saying things similar, not exactly the same, but similar when I was married, which has some to do with why I am no longer married.
Sure.
And there are lots more reasons. And folks, for those of you who have heard me talk about that in the past, I want to let you know there is an episode coming out soon, a solo episode where I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my story, talk about my pain and how I've been able to work through my pain to get to my purpose and ultimately my platform. But that's for another time. But yeah, Pablo, that is wow.
Yeah, man, like when that came out of her mouth, I was making a little bit over $100,000. I had this sweet job title of director of sustainability, working for a big hospital developer that, quite frankly, had acquired my company, brought me in house. And after about a year and a half, when I had figured out everything that they needed me to figure out, they just kind of stashed me away. And I was working like 15, 20 hours a week, making good money and not really challenging myself in any way. And knowing in the back of my mind that the moment that an analyst would look at what's going on here, I would have an issue, but I really wasn't moving towards it. So I had gotten pretty complacent with my career. And, my outlet at that point had become my civic engagement, right? Like my involvement with nonprofits and all these different things, but I wasn't tying it all together, right? Like I really wasn't maximizing the gifts that I've been given. I wasn't maximizing the opportunities that I've been given. I wasn't growing. I was just in this comfort zone. And I felt offended to be challenged. But when somebody you respect, right? Like it's when somebody you truly admire, who sees you every day and knows exactly what you stand for, and they challenge you, you got two options, right? You can you can cower or you can step up, right?
Yeah.
And I feel lucky that I got that challenge and that I had the wherewithal within me to step up, right? Like it's really changed things for me.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of those changes, because really what that's done is you've done a little bit for us and taken us back in time and told us a little bit about it and kind of like that demarcation point. It's like it was at this point that things really began to change. So how have they changed for you since then? And what impact has that had on where you are now and where you're headed?
Yeah, John. First of all, it's been the commitment to work on it, man. That's the profound change, right? That is the commitment to not hide behind things and to not take things for what they are as opposed to what they can be, that I know they can be, and that I know that I can affect them. And a little bit of backstory about me. I'm the most American person in my family, right? Like my first formative memory is walking into preschool, being the kid that didn't speak English, and everybody else spoke English. There was one other kid that spoke Spanish. And that was like a really like a formative memory in my life. And it's always driven me to be this person that seeks belonging and seeks to help people belong around me.
Okay.
And those skill sets served me real well, right? Those skill sets served me real well as a kid. They served me great in high school and college as a young professional. And graduate university, I got this like executive and training program for a Fortune 500 construction company. Spent about a year under this like program. A year and a half later, I moved to Southern California. I take over this like $15 million division of a Fortune 500 company. And I got 120 people working for me as a 25-year-old. And there I become a green building expert. 2009, I moved back to Miami. I started a green building consulting company. And that's when I get involved with the community as well. Just got an email from Habitat for Humanity saying they needed to start a young professionals group and looking for volunteers. I raised my hand, and that set me on this like parallel track in my life. A couple years in, my green building company gets acquired by my biggest client. I go in-house as director of sustainability for this hospital developer, university developer, big public project company. And that's when, right when I get acquired is when I met Marta. And that, you know, like I'm like living large for a while there, feeling pretty good about myself. But like I said, right, like I was at this like crossroads of my star in the community was rising, right? Like like right around the time I was starting to win awards, right? Like I was on multiple charities. I had started multiple young professional groups, got named to a top 20 under 40 in a big magazine down there. And at the same time, my star inside my company was completely stagnant and, you know, maybe even trending down, right? I was just the guy that could handle this like green certification thing. I wasn't part of the strategy when there was a big presentation and they needed someone to come in and make people feel good or whatever, they'd bring me in. And I was just kind of like happy to make money and not work hard, right? So seeing that happen, and I guess I've never really spoken about this because I tie this to other things, right? Like the other big struggle that I had was my brother passing away, right? Like I have an older brother who's 8.5 years older than me. He struggled with pancreatic cancer for a couple of years. He passed away, and that was, you know, that's the first time in my life I experienced struggle. I come from a pretty well-to-do family. I was the youngest. So by the time that I was a kid, my dad was doing well and he could be my baseball coach and my soccer coach and stuff like that. And I just really I had always been comfortable, man. I'd always tell people that I never had a problem that I didn't create for myself. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a real fortunate place to be. But at the end of the day, I struggled with this like self-worth of like, do I deserve all of this?
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty apparent to Marta, yet I wasn't really acting on it, man. So when my brother passed, a couple of interesting things happened. 1,200 people showed up to his funeral.
Wow.
Which was really eye-opening. And at that point, I looked around and I'm like, you know, I can say what I want about the Catholic Church and however I felt growing up in the Catholic Church, but this is my community. I can never leave this, right? Like all these people that just showed up have been showing up for the last 2 years, making my mom feel better, so that the kids could show up to school when there was a problem, you know, things of that sort. And at the moment I was like, there's nothing more valuable than community if it can help us through this.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened, and I instantly started seeing community as a business model, right? Like I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you solve customer churn, because I was about to churn out here, and and now I'm not going anywhere. But the other thing that happened was everybody that reached out to me that day and for years afterwards about my brother would reach out to me, and they would tell me that they loved my brother because my brother was this guy that lit up a room, made sure everybody felt good. Like they knew that he was somewhere, everybody was going to be comfortable and we'd all be having a good time. And that's this quality that I've always really admired in myself. And my brother being my best man, you know, my brother's 8.5 years older than me. It does funny things. It's somebody that is old, you know, far away enough from you to like judge it.
Okay.
But close enough to you to like contextualize. And I would always kind of like compare myself to my brother and just be like, okay, well, Bert, graduated college. He didn't get a job at a career fair. So I'm going to get a job at a career fair because that's a mistake. Like, right. Like I'd always call out the things that he did that I didn't want to do, but I never gave him credit for the stuff that I admired about him that I wanted to be like. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then all of a sudden, all these people are coming out of the woodwork telling me that what they see in him is this greatest quality that I admire the most.
Yeah.
And it hit me immediately that what else am I missing in people? Right? Like what if I can not see this quality that I most admire in the best man at my wedding, what am I missing in the guy that I consider to be my loser uncle? What am I missing in like that guy in our group of friends that I just don't think he's that great and I don't want to hang out with him? What about, like what are we seeing in each other? Everybody has this like inherent value to other people, and we can always look harder at it, right? So and that was at the same time that my wife was going through all this stuff. So I just really, really leaned into that and decided to continue trying to not, I didn't really want to fit into the contractor culture that I was in, right? Like my career wasn't going to be, oh, okay, well then I just got to be a contractor, bro. It was I need to figure out how to make this stuff fit. This like community engagement stuff that I'm doing that I know works. One of the big things I figured out being a part of nonprofits is that the most influential people in your city are on the boards of nonprofits. And there was a very common trait in all of them and all these incredibly successful people, and it's that they like to serve and they like to serve others. Yep. So immediately I started noticing that my Ace Ventura shtick that had gotten me this far had a shelf life, and the way that I would really build influence is by serving others. Yes. So I just continued to lean into that, continue to seek the value in others. And instead of using my superpower, which is my ability to be liked and get people to feel good about themselves, instead of using it for my own gain, I started using it to get people to connect to each other and to see the value in themselves and articulate that value. And I mean, I'll stop there because then it's like the big demarcation point of like what got me to where I'm at. But, it took that struggle. It took seeing struggle up close for me in order to realize that everybody has to go through this thing, man. Like I had to embrace it, and there was no growth without it, right? Like I was stagnated.
Sure. Okay. So you came to this realization that the best of the best out there figure out it's not about them.
Yeah.
It's about serving other people. Now, were you observing this more in terms of them in their personal lives, in their day-to-day business lives, or was it a combination of both?
It was a combination. It was very obvious to me that these folks that were high power executives and high powered on the board of these charities, there was no demarcation between who they were as a professional and who they were as a person. It overflowed in all of this, right? And you can only be in so many rooms with folks like this that are giving you life advice, right? We had this formula for building these young professional groups and we replicated this across 4 different charities really successfully, including the Economic Development Agency of Miami. Where, we would recruit young professionals and say, hey man, if you want to get ahead in your career, like you can go volunteer wherever you want. But what we're doing is every month when we meet to plan our events, we're going to meet at the boardroom of one of the directors of the charity. They're going to show up and give us life advice, tell us their journey and what they've done to become who they are. We're going to have some Q&A with them. And then afterwards, we're going to go plan our happy hour or our build or our gala or whatever we're doing, right? So I was systematically exposed to these people, giving me their showing up to be like, hey, this is my life, right? Like this was like pre-podcasting. It was like a one-on-one podcast, man.
Right.
And you can only hear so many people talk about this idea of, getting involved in the community, getting involved in committees, serving on things for others, doing things for other people is why I am who I am today, right? Like the pattern recognition was right there. And you could tell that it was just, you use that term, lifestyle networking, man. I love it, right? Like it's a networking lifestyle that I have absolutely truly embraced. And it's this idea that community is really, really valuable. And most people are born into some form of community, whether it's your family or it's
Mhm.
like your group of friends from school or whatever.
Sure.
But not most people decide, you know what, I'm going to curate my own one. And
Yep.
the only way that you do that is by going out there and interacting with people and talking and meeting 100 people so that you understand who the 12 that you most want to be in your crew are, right? Like, and I just saw that pattern over and over. And then I started seeing that the young professionals that we started these groups with, 4, 5, 6 years in, we're all becoming decision makers in our companies, and we're
Yeah.
all leveling up at the same time. So, it was just this like very obvious pattern recognition of service being the common delineator of people that are fulfilled and happy and live a life of integrity where they're matching what they say they want to do, versus people that just show up to get a paycheck, people that look at try to be transactionally driven instead of relationship driven, and
Hmm.
it was very clear who was winning, you
Oh,
know
for
at
sure.
least based on my scorecard.
Right, right. And it kind of goes back to, and this is a question I occasionally ask people on the show, but I don't always ask. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you what your definition of success is.
Oh man, so I've thought this through, right? in early 2019, when I became obsessed with Justin Schenk's podcast,
Hmm.
and and his definition, he always asks that to people, right?
Hmm.
So to me, true success, John, comes in 4 stages. The
Okay.
first stage is finding something that you love doing that you're really, really good at, right? Like, I think that's the first part. You got to find out your superpower, right? The thing that you were put on earth to do that you actually love doing.
Yeah.
Then the next piece is figure out how to use that for service, right? So like, you figure
Hmm.
out what feels good that you love doing, that people give you acknowledgement. Then you figure out how to help others with it, right? And then that allows you to do it more often.
Right.
Once you figure out how to use that for service and you're able to do it more often because of that, figure out how to monetize that in a genuine way where it doesn't lose that joy, where it's still your superpower. You're still doing it out of joy. It's not transactional. It's lifestyle driven, right? Like,
Right.
and then once you figure out that, once you've monetized that one time, go build a business around a business being driven by that happening. And at that point, that's my true definition of success, right? Because I don't, a lot of people think that they're just like, I just want the ability to do whatever I want. But that's not freedom. The ability to do whatever you want isn't freedom. The doing what you want is freedom, right? So if you're building a business doing anything other than the thing that you love doing, that you're awesome at, that you feel that you're in your zone doing, if that's not driving the business that you built, you should just go get a job, right? Like, um, so that's my definition of success. It's finding that superpower, serving others with it, monetizing it in a genuine way, and building a business around it. Therefore, you are enabled to be using your superpower as a service as often as possible and as big as possible.
Love that, man. Love that definition. Folks, just so that you know, we'll make sure that that definition is in the show notes.
All
So
right,
you'll be
cool.
able to check that out because it's really good. And I think people are going to want that.
Thanks, man.
All right. You've come up with something that's kind of, in my mind, revolutionary. And I want to talk about it. Your relationship flywheel.
Yeah.
Dig in, man. Tell us about that.
Perfect timing for that, man. So I described that little trick to get young professionals to volunteer for us, right? And I described it as this in-person podcast. I never actually described it like that before, but I realized that the most successful people are the ones that are meeting with people, and then they're like, who can I introduce you to? And then they're introducing them, and that's how relationships are formed, right? Adding
Yeah,
value to people as much as possible.
sure.
So I had this moment. In that construction company where the CEO got invited to speak on a panel about smart cities in front of the Economic Development Agency of Miami. He decided at the last minute he didn't want to go, so they sent me instead. I show up to this thing, and I share a stage in front of about 80 people at the Economic Development Agency with the head of Latin America for Cisco Systems and the head of the Smart Cities Initiative for the World Bank, and me, who feels like he's at a dead end in his job. And
Yeah.
no, but luckily, because of nonprofits, I had spent time on stage. I had spent time moderating things, public speaking, networking, right? Like all these
Right.
soft skills came to me from that world. And so I do my thing. And when I come off that stage, there's a line 6 people deep waiting to talk to me.
Nice.
3 of them were contractors trying to sell me something that thought that I was a decision maker in my company. 2 of them were developers that were like, hey man, what's it like to bring on a guy like you? You know, like I want you to come work for me. And one funny is this guy, Will Beckham, who I actually just got off the phone with because I'm in Miami. I'm going to go grab coffee with him tomorrow. And he was like a young man. He was like, hey man, I'm into this stuff. I just want some mentorship. Right. But what hit me was everybody here thinks I'm more important than I am. And I realized from studying influence my whole life that the brain justifies what it sees. And when you're on a stage and someone's in an audience, they're like, oh man, you know, they must be really valuable, right? That's why they tell you don't believe everything you see on TV or, you know, like things of the sort, right? Because the brain does that. And on top of that, if you're being guilty by association with other people, it exaggerates that validation that you get on the stage, right? So as soon as that happened to me, I thought, this is an interesting trick. How can I leverage this to serve others? And immediately I reached out to this developer that in South Miami was building this high rise in a low density, high income area where nobody wants a high rise in their backyard. But he was building it on top of the Metro rail station in front of the University of Miami. So it was this like transit oriented development, right? It was like incentivizing public transportation in the city of Miami that's desperately needed. Okay. So I reached out to this gentleman. I'm like, hey man, I know you're having a hard time with the city. I want to put you on stage with a politician on the board of one of my charities that is passionate about transportation and a land use attorney that started one of these groups with, and we're going to talk about trans-oriented development. And I'm going to invite these like young professionals that I'm like a steward for in Miami to find out about the future of development in Miami and how trans-oriented development fits in. This guy who probably got 20 calls from contractors a day and didn't really want to talk to him, took my call, was very happy to do this, put on this event a month later. The next week he's in our office like, hey man, you guys gonna bid on the $60 million project or what? Right. So we're like backdooring this huge deal that everybody wanted because I led through this value driven, you know, put you on a stage as like a mass introduction and introduce you to people on the stage you want to be guilty by association with. And since then that turned me into a business developer. And all I've done is continue to reiterate that concept through where the world is headed. And where the world is headed is this idea that there's stages everywhere, right? Your phone is the most, you know, scalable stage in the world, right? So
true.
Yeah. So what my relationship flywheel is the ability to, if you can figure out the people that you're trying to serve, like I wanted to serve this developer that was building this high rise. I knew what was valuable to him, right? It was speaking about the good things that his projects are doing to people that want to hear that, right? That those were the young professionals that were ready to support this thing, right? So if you can figure that out, there's 3 pillars to the flywheel. It's value, connections, and content, right? So if you can figure out what's valuable to people that you want to serve and connect the dots between the people that you're trying to serve and the people that can get them that value, right? So what if it's your clientele, it's what apart from your own solution helps them along in their journey, right? And how can you get people in front of them that can help them reach that front of that journey? And the easiest way to do that and design a stage to do that on is a Zoom call, right? Like it's like a Zoom webinar or a podcast or however you want to do it. But the most powerful way to do it is to do a live Zoom webinar. And as you are interviewing this person that's bringing value to your audience, you invite your audience in. When they show up, whether it's 6, 16, or 60 of them, they feel like they're getting an hour of your time, right? While you're only spending 1 hour building that relationship with them.
Sure.
The person that you are interviewing, you're building a deep relationship with, right? Like this is the connection piece of it. And those people are usually either your best client because you want to talk about how great they are and like showcase them to your other clients so you can be guilty by association with them. It's somebody that you want to be your client, right? Like trying to, hey man, what's your superpower? How can I help you? This or that, like make it in an interesting way. Or it's another industry expert that you want to, you know, showcase that you're on a stage with them, right? So you're facilitating that connection. and then you facilitate the connection between the audience and the guests themselves, right? So when you're driving them to ask questions, when they ask a question, you don't just say, hey, what are your top 3 tips to do this? You say, oh, hey, my buddy John, who's in Kansas City, he's a huge Chiefs fan and he's a great entrepreneur. He's got this question for you. What are your top 3 tips to blah? And you phrase it as a warm intro. So now you're doing that same dynamic that I was doing in that room, in the young professional groups, the stage that I did for the developer, but you're doing it on a recorded Zoom call. And now you move into the content phase of it, which is that you take that 1 hour call and you turn the 1 hour video into a branded YouTube show. You take the 10 best minutes into a YouTube golden nugget. You turn the audio into a podcast. You turn the 5 best, back and forth between you and the guest, or the guest saying something great, into social media optimized video segments for LinkedIn and for Facebook and for Instagram. You take the 5 best Q&As of somebody asking a question. You turn that into Q&A material that actually calls out the person's name so they feel like they got a piece of the stage. You take the 5 best things said, you turn them into quote cards. You turn the lessons learned, you turn it into an email that you send to your list. You expand that email into an SEO optimized blog. So now you have taken this like one seed and you've planted it in 20 pots across 6 different ecosystems. And every time you're inviting somebody on your stage, you're not just inviting them to be like, hey, man, I want you to talk to my clients. You're saying, I'm going to invite you to my stage to talk to my clients, people that will see value in you that I can connect you to. And I'm going to give you a ton of marketing materials for yourself, right? Yeah. So the more you do that, the more marketing materials you're making for extraordinary people, the more other people see it that are going to be interested in it. The better people that you're getting on your stage, the more the audience grows that shows up and continues to connect. And you serve as the stage in the middle that's making these connections. And it turns into this flywheel of growth, because now everybody that you're trying to serve sees you as guilty by association with the solutions of their problems and all these extraordinary people that you've had around you.
For sure. For sure. Essentially, you become the connector that provides the solutions to their problems.
Correct. And if you provide enough solutions, they will assume that your solution is part of their solution as well.
That's right.
That's right. Like be guilty by association with solutions, period.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. All right. I want to take kind of a slightly different direction now, because this particular podcast isn't just called revenue. It's called Relationships and Revenue. And we've been spending a lot of time talking about, the business side of things, which is how you spend the vast majority of your time, which I know. But you also mentioned early on, you wouldn't be where you are today without Marta.
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about that, because it is my belief, and I have shared this many times on this podcast, that how things go at home directly impacts our businesses. Yeah, so what are you doing to work on and improve your home relationships so that you can be better in business?
John, I told you a little bit before the show, like there is no line item more devoted to in my P&L that is relationship investment, right? Everything from therapists to investing in our diet and in our health and anything that we can do to perform at our best. It is all an investment in our relationship. We do a couple of things, right? Like, so first of all, me and Marta have at different times had our own therapy in order to get the tools that we need to communicate with ourselves to then communicate to others. Sure. We've had joint therapy, right? Like we've had marriage therapy, we've had sex therapy, we've had a couple of different joint therapies in order to get the tools to then again communicate and continue to grow that. We set aside, we set aside a Wednesday night is our night together, right? Like we have a schedule of, hey, Tuesdays, I know that is my really, really busy day. I'm probably going to work late. I need you to carry dinner on Tuesday, Marta. Monday is the day that she wants to take her yoga class. I carry dinner on Monday, right? Wednesday is our date night. Friday, we generally do date night as well. And we plan our weeks with intentful moments that are for us. And that's it. then on top of that, so each week we have one. Each month we plan it so that we have a day that's for us, and each quarter we plan it so that we have a weekend that's for us. And we, you know, we stay real diligent about making time for each other, John, because it's not the same to being next to someone is not the same as being with someone.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah. And
Oh man.
I think guys get that twisted a lot, man. They're just like, man, what
Sure.
do you want? Like, I'm here. And it's
Yeah.
not about being there, it's about being present, right? Like
Yeah, it
it's
is.
about being there with a reason to intentfully interact with your significant other in a way that you are growing closer together. Because you're either gonna grow closer together or grow apart, right? Like
For
if it's
sure.
just like, dude, I allow you to do whatever you want. What's the big deal? I do what I want. You do what you want. What's the big? No, man. You need to like.
That's not a relationship.
That's not a relationship. Like
Those are roommates.
those are roommates. Yeah, those are
I've
roommates.
been there. I know what that is.
Yeah, and I've seen it, man. I recently saw one of my best friends go through a divorce where on the outside looking in, it looked like they had a great relationship because
Mhm.
they were both freely doing the things that they wanted, and you assume that they're fine at home or whatever, and they grew apart, man. Like you really need to choose to grow together. So, you know, one of the anchor for us is food, man. Like Marta
Okay.
is an unbelievable person in the kitchen. It's made me a really, really good chef and a beast of a sous chef. Like I'm like a
Nice.
ninja with a kitchen knife. And there's nothing I enjoy more than me and her preparing and eating a meal together, right? Like having our roles,
Mm,
creating these meals. Like we cook really well. It's then very, very enjoyable. Like that to me has always been the foundation because it's this moments during the week where you're working on something together and
yes.
then you're enjoying it together, right?
Hmm.
I just don't think that there's anything more powerful to it. Like it brings me back to my nonprofit days. I used to always tell people, if what's a better referral, somebody that tells you, oh, I've known this guy for 10 years or I went to college with him, or hey, I worked on this like gala committee with this person and he helped fundraise these many things, and in the final hour when we needed to put pamphlets together, he showed up to put the invitations and send them out in the mail, right? Like the idea of working on something with somebody is much more powerful than the idea, you know, it's a powerful bond creator. So I
Sure.
love cooking with my wife. That's our number one thing. And we're lucky to live in Jacksonville and we get to go walk on the beach on weeknights as well.
Mm, that's fantastic. You
Yeah.
know, for those of you who are listening, both male and female listening, this is really, really important. Something that Pablo said that I really want you to hone in on. They are intentional, and it is in their schedule, is built into their calendars to have at least once a week a date night where they focus on each other. Then they have special things they do once a month and special weekends once a quarter. That is huge. That is so important to keep those flames alive. And I don't want to overlook what you said about the whole thing about therapy. Um, Men, for those of you who are listening, going to therapy doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do something right. Sometimes what it means is you just need to tweak some things. Let me give you an example. How many of you, if you don't already work on your own cars, just let your car go? You don't change the oil, you don't do anything with it, you just keep driving, keep driving, keep driving, and just expect everything's going to work out great. Well, guess what? It's not going to. Eventually, it's going to break down. And the longer you wait, the more expensive the repair. The longer you wait in your relationships, when you start to figure out that something's wrong, okay, first of all, your significant other's already known for a long time something's wrong. I can just tell you that now. But once you do figure it out, do something about it. Jump right into it. And it's scary. I'll tell you that. It is scary the first time you go into therapy because you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going on. There will be times where you feel like you're being ganged up on. You're not, but do it. It's for the health of your relationship, not just in that moment, but going forward. We can talk more about this in another time. I just wanted to be sure to include that for all of you listeners and viewers out there who may be thinking, well, maybe that's what Pablo needed in his relationship, but my relationship's fine. I can tell you right now, it's not. Every single one of you that says your relationship is fine is full of crap. It's not. There's something that needs to be worked on, and you need to be man enough to admit that you need help. Admitting you need help and asking for it, that's called wisdom. It took me 40 years to figure that out. Don't let it take you that long. I get very, very passionate about that. So if you feel like I'm coming down on you all, I'm really not. It's because I care. If I didn't care, I'd never mention it. I just wouldn't.
It's true, man. And listen, I think a lot of people, guys, right? I'll speak for guys because I know the male brain.
Yeah.
They'll be like, well, what's talking about my feelings going to help? It's not about talking about your feelings. Therapy is a way to get tools to name things. Once you can name something, then you are aware of it. Once you're aware of something, then you can manage it, right? Like it's just relationships and revenue, right? What doesn't get managed, what doesn't get measured, doesn't get managed. If you haven't measured it, then you're not going to manage it. And if you haven't even identified it, how are you going to measure it, right? So
Exactly.
what therapy does is it gives you those tools, whether it is identifying something so that now you can pattern recognize and then name it and be able to like see it happen again and be able to get the reticular activator working. Or again, this is their job, right? Like that is the therapist's job. Once they know that you have a leaky carburetor, they have repaired so many carburetors before that they know what the patchwork looks like. It's like, hey, now when you feel it leaking, you got to do this, right? And then the rest is reps, man. So it's really not about like talking and making somebody and, like complaining or whatever it is. It's really just the idea of identifying the issues and then receiving tools to be able to address the issues.
For sure. And what I tell guys all the time is like, look, at your job, whether it's your business or you're working for somebody else, if somebody comes to you and say, look, if you want to continue to work here, or if you want to continue to have this client, you have to get a new skill set. Guess what? You're going to learn that new skill set. Yeah. It's going to happen. Yeah. So being able to talk about feelings and emotions is just another skill set you have to learn how to do.
Correct.
That's it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It takes practice, and you won't be great at it at first. But guess what? If you never do it, you'll always be horrible at it. Food for thought.
Totally agree. And if we want to keep ranting about this, I'm in, right? Like, not ranting, but giving more advice on things that one sees. The other thing that I often hear, it's like, well, I'm doing this for her, man. Like I'm like working super hard and I'm doing this for her. That's not true. You're doing it for you. Like you really want to have a high power job. You want to make a bunch of money and you're doing it for you.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Is she on board with it? Yes. But don't confuse the idea that you're working hard with the idea that you're working hard on your marriage. Because that's just
not the same.
That is mutually exclusive, brother. Right?
Sure.
So that's one thing. And then, and I'll say this, right? Because I think that there is a lot of unspoken, the sexual trauma that has happened to so many women, right? Like the statistics are daunting.
Oh my God.
And what happens is that the guy that then has a healthy relationship with her later on becomes this like third party victim that never got to see the abuser, never got to whatever, but they have to suffer through the trauma that was induced in their loved one later on in their relationships.
Right.
And that can be a very helpless feeling. And I got stuck in this like whirlwind of, well, all I can do is just stay out of the way. Like I didn't do this. All I can do is stay out of the way and let her heal, right? And not make things worse. That's bullshit too. Mm-hmm. There is always something you can do. No matter what the situation is in life, in marriage, in business, no matter how difficult things are, there is always something that you can do that can help make things better. And it's not always fixing something. It's just there's always a move, man. There is always a move that adds value in any conversation that you're in any situation that you're in any room that you're in. There's always a way to add value. And I think that's really easy to internalize in like a business dealing or in a networking setting. But when your wife is, suffering from something that you had nothing to do with, there is always something you can do to add value to the scenario. And the more that you get yourself to own it, the better that stuff's going to happen, right? Like while my wife was going through this stuff, it was during the Me Too movement, when the Me Too thing went viral, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actively started talking to my guy friends who are just like, whoa, women are going to pay for this because now they're not going to get meetings with guys because they're going to be scared to get ratted out. I'm like, no, bro, you guys got to stop that. Like stop thinking like a troglodyte, like, and this had nothing to do with her being around. This wasn't me like showcasing in front of her. This was in private, in groups of dudes, in locker room talk, being like, guys, the world has changed. Like you didn't need to just buck up with this. Like, there's always something, and that might not sound like I'm doing anything to help my marriage, but I was, right? Like showing up in that room without her there to be like, no. This stuff does cause trauma that affects other people, and getting people to understand it helped my marriage, right? Like in some way it did.
I can promise you it got back to her in some form or fashion. She did find out.
Some way, whatever.
Well,
man.
They know. Trust me, they find
know.
out.
They know when you're fully engaged. They just know when you're fully engaged in the problem, right? Like if you are on board, you can feel it. If you're just like, yeah, all right, cool, and then you turn around and you're like, yeah, fucking bitch. Like, no, man, like that's not how it goes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. I know folks have heard you talking today and have seen what you said. And they'd be like, oh, man, I got to find out more about Pablo. Where are you, Pablo? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Chief Executive Connector podcast. That is where I would love to be connected with. If you go to if you look up the Chief Executive Connector podcast, listen to my podcast. That's my baby. Those are my conversations with people of how you learn from others, right? How you see the value in others and how you learn from it and how you apply it in your life. That's really, really what I'm about.
Okay.
And episode 7 and episode 69 are my two favorite ones, where I did like a summary of my previous year in like a rapping, storytelling, ranting fashion over like a beat. So it's the 2019 last call and 2020 last call. But go to the Chief Executive Connector podcast, and I'll say something else about podcasts. Audio is the new frontier of content, right? Like as a guy called Pablo Gonzalez, I might as well be called John Smith of Latin America, where people have way more kids and call them after themselves all the time. I've never ranked in anything, right? Like it's hard to, you go on LinkedIn and you put in Pablo Gonzalez, good luck, bro.
Yeah.
If you search iTunes or Spotify and you put in Pablo Gonzalez with a Z at the end, which is my name, my two podcasts come out 1 and 2, right? Like the idea that Spotify is the new Google of audio is real. And I would encourage anybody that's trying to build a name for themselves and you want to rank on something, start podcasting, start working with John, get your podcast going, man. Because audio is this new frontier, and there is all this valuable beachfront real estate that nobody's buying right now, and you can own it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So now we come to our time of our final 4. It's just going to be the 4 quick questions I'm going to ask you. Just tell me the first thing that pops in your mind. Just gives folks a little different flavor about you.
Let's go. I love a lightning round.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. Why did God create Pablo?
To be a hype man. My gift is that I fall in love with everybody that I meet. I see something special in them, and I'm a really good communicator that's not shy about communicating. So I am here to speak on why you're awesome, even if you don't believe it.
Love that. I love that you have it inside of you. You've been given the gift of believing in people before they believe in themselves, because that is a rare gift. It really is.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I'm a cheerleader, man. I really am.
All right. Second question. What are you doing, reading, or listening to right now that's helping you grow?
Oof. I just, on my drive to Miami, I started Behind the Cloud. It is Mark Benioff's story of Salesforce, how he grew Salesforce.
Okay.
And it's brilliant. Like it is,
Mm-hmm.
the book is broken out into plays. It's like 126 plays, he calls them, which is like 126 different moves of how he turned Salesforce into the company that it is. Okay. And it's categorized in different subjects. So it's like the playbook on startups, the playbook on sales, the playbook on marketing, the playbook on events, the playbook on company culture, the playbook, whatever. And each playbook has all these different like little plays. It's amazing. I'm in love with it. Yeah. Okay. Behind the Cloud by Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce.
Okay. Well, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes, folks. All right. Question number 3 it's a 2-part question, but you'll understand why. What do you do for fun? And what do you do with Marta for fun?
Yeah, man. With Marta for fun, it's cooking, man. Like we love to cook, and we love to spend time on the beach, right? For me, for fun, it's very similar. I like to surf, and I like to play spike ball, man. We actually just we just pulled off a 64 team spike ball tournament for charity last week, and it was awesome, man. Yeah. We had like 200 people out on the beach. It was incredible, dude. I got to send you a picture of it.
Definitely.
So yeah, I like the surf. Surfing is my number one thing that I like to do for fun.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And last question. What are you most grateful for?
John, I'm grateful for the people in my life, man. Like I'm grateful for the relationships from the ones I was gifted that are my family, to the ones that I have worked hard to create and maintain. Like there's nothing more important to me than relationships, and to maintain relationships long term, right? Like if you read Jim Collins's books, Good to Great, right? The Beyond Entrepreneurship, stuff like that. It's very clear that being transactionally driven is less valuable than being relationship driven, right? Like if you focus on relationships, the transactions, everything else comes, man. And I've been very lucky to just kind of intuitively do that my whole life. And for a long time in my life, I felt like I was falling upwards because of it. And now I'm very intentionally climbing upwards because of it. And so yeah, I'm grateful for my ability to talk to people, man. Cause I think if I couldn't listen and I couldn't communicate, then I wouldn't have these relationships. And so that plus the ones that I've been gifted in my family, dude. Like I'm here in Miami. Yesterday after Mother's Day lunch, we like hung out with my sister's family and then came home, and my brother's kids came over, and I have the 2 most incredible nieces and nephew that are my brother's kids that are growing up to be these amazing humans. We just like sat around my dad's bar right here. They're older, right? So one just turned 21 and just got back from Nashville, where she celebrated her 21st birthday with her friends.
Okay.
Sat around my dad's bar, drinking wine with them and like playing country music and like doing like sing along karaoke while changing the names of the words to like my dad and this and that. It's the best. I love people, man.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was great, dude.
Sounds like a lot of fun. All right. Well, listen, thank you, Pablo, for spending some time with us today, being able to share some of yourself and some of the wisdom you've gained over the years. Some I know that's come through a lot of hard work and making mistakes, but honestly, isn't that the only way we learn is by making mistakes? So thank you for sharing those things with us so that we can in turn be better because of it.
Thank you, John, man. I appreciate the opportunity to share. We hit on some stuff I normally don't really talk about, man. So it's every man has value, right? Like everybody, everything, every experience you have has something that somebody else can learn from. So thanks for the opportunity to share that, buddy.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And listeners and viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in today. We are awfully glad that you were here, because if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click on that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every single time a new video comes out.